We thought we would organize a fun kind of Shark Tank style pitch event. We wanted to feature some of the most relevant startups to you all here. And so without going too much into details and introductions, I think that these companies are going to each give a quick pitch. We'll have some questions here from the audience after each pitch. Kind of our judges scattered throughout will have opportunities to chime in and ask a few questions. But without too much more further ado, we've got 7 companies here. Want to say something, Kevin?
See what we have. I know there are some people who are extremely interested either from an investment standpoint. I know there's companies, whether it's Bunge's or ADM's, Cargill's. I know there's some folks here from Schooler and some other places, and we're all making alternative investments into the space with Connie at Yield Lab, Brian Carter at iSelect, and some of our other partners. It's kind of what I feel gives us an edge if you're looking for that competitive advantage. I think if you can kind of monitor and track what's happening at iSelect and Yield Lab in the space that's relevant to you, I'd be more than happy. That's why I run them. I've had some producers call us and say, hey, this is like possibly a game changer for my specific area, whether it's with irrigation or whatever it may be. So it's helped me a lot to stay ahead of things. It's given me different perspectives, the way to look at things. So I use the pitch rounds and pitch sessions when I get invited to be on the calls or asked to, like I said, to help take a different view or different perspective and maybe give me an insight as to where I can get some premium or maybe outproduce some of our other competitors. So I hope you guys find it enjoyable. Like I said, the card to rank them is in the packet. We'd like to have those filled out so you guys can give us your opinion. And we found, Carter will tell you, and Brian, I mean, you guys and the end users and the producers are our best feedback on these and tend to give us some of the best innovative thoughts and ideas. So I appreciate it if you guys would, kind of write in and pay attention to what they're offering. So thank you, Connie, again for doing this. And Carter and Brian, thank you guys.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin, so much for having us. This is great. And just to add to that, yeah, you've all got cards in your folders, so we want to have kind of an audience select. This is a competition, so after you hear all the pitches, vote for your favorite. And you can just leave those there on the table, and we'll collect them and announce the winner tomorrow. And then also just to capitalize on what Kevin is saying, I think it's really valuable for these companies to be able to pitch to an audience like you all, because this is different than your usual ag tech kind of sphere of folks. And I think that it's really, really important to get kind of your feedback and actually have people on the ground who understand this space a little bit more in a reality-grounded type of way. So just glad to have you guys listening, and we are going to have each company give about an 8-minute pitch. We're going to start off with CoverCress, which is a cover crop company, and I'm going to let Jerry Steiner come up here and tell us a little bit more about it.
Thank you, Connie, and thank you all for this opportunity. So on your ballot, we're listed as Arvigenics. That's what we were about till a week ago when we changed our name to CoverCress. No one could say Arvigenics, nor did anyone ever say when they got a V, a G, and an N and an X in Scrabble, they were excited about what word they were going to make. So we changed it to a name that really reflects what exactly we are trying to do. So we're a cover crop, but we're also a cash crop, and I'll talk more about that in a minute. But first, I want to spend a couple of minutes on our team because this is how it makes it happen. We are out of St. Louis, so one of the advantages of being in St. Louis is that we do have a deep talent pool of really experienced people. I spent 30 years in Monsanto in a variety of roles, including my last 10 on the executive team. I'm joined here by Chris Handel. Dr. Handel, raise your hand. So Chris comes from McKinsey as well as the banking sector in Brazil and brings a lot of strategic and operational talent to our team. Tim Almasoff led all of the value-added oils such as Vistiv at Monsanto. Mark Messmer led the North American corn breeding program for Monsanto, which has been extremely successful, and Jerry Yelly here leads our regulatory. So we are blessed to have a very experienced and deep team. And this team has largely worked for equity, so we've been able to do an awful lot with a very limited amount of money. The problem that we are aimed at addressing is that we have this incredibly productive corn and soybean rotation in the Midwest, but it does have one feature that doesn't exist in nature, and that is that for half the year, the land lies bare. Which we all know leads to an opportunity for erosion and or nutrient loss, and we think we could do something about that. But in addition to that, we have the opportunity to bring more income in, bring it from a diverse source because we're coming out of a winter crop rather than just a summer one. And if we think about long term, we think about the climate report that was just released last week. This is an opportunity to producing food or a feedstock for renewable diesel or renewable jet fuel and do it with very low carbon intensity. What is covercress? Well, how many of you know the I'm going to call it a native plant, you might call it a weed, pennycress. It's a weed you'll see in ditch banks and farm fields. We have taken that native plant because we like the fact that it germinates on the surface and makes the agronomy easy. And it's also the first thing to mature in spring. So we like its agronomy, but we did not like its composition. And what we have done is use genome editing to change the composition so that when we harvest it, it produces oil and meal that is very similar to canola. And just like Uber, where they're using a car that 95% of the time is sitting still, we're using land during that time of year when today it's not earning anything for the farmer. This plant will grow all the way north to Alaska very easily, but when we look at the zone where it fits in the system where we're fitting between corn harvest and soybean planting, it fits in the yellow zone, largely the zone between I-64 on the south and I-80 on the north, because that's when we can get out in May in time to still plant a full season soybean crop. You can see what it looks like when it's this time of year, if it isn't covered by snow in the upper right. And for those of you that have seen native pennycress, you know that the seeds are black. Ours are golden, and that's part of the edit that we have made that makes it much more valuable as a feed meal. This is an exciting opportunity for three things that I'm going to talk about. First, the agronomy is simple and therefore low cost to grow. Secondly, we're 5 years old, so in terms of making a new crop, it's not an easy thing to do, but we're well on our way into it, and we've been able to produce a grain quality that's going to have a market fit out there. First of all, the agronomics. What we're doing today is that we are planting this on the surface either immediately before or immediately after corn harvest. Whether that is no-till or, as you see right here, and what we see in a large part of Illinois and Indiana, that part of the Corn Belt where they've got one tillage strip going through that. It establishes, including in very heavy crop residue, gets a stand going that protects the plant, especially in the early spring. It grows at anything probably above 40 degrees. We put on a little bit of nitrogen in the spring. We harvest it with the soybean crop, so it's a cover crop. It performed all those duties, but it's a cover crop that we terminate with a combine instead of a sprayer. And then we no-till soybeans in right behind it. This is our 5th year. We've just planted our 5th year's yield trials, and we've harvested 4 because we'll harvest the 5th one next May. In the last 2 years, so 2017 and 18, we have the result of the breeding program that was started in 2014. And you can see that in that first breeding cycle where we took good parents and crossed them, we were able to meet our commercial standard of 1,500 pounds. And that second cycle is just starting now, and we can see our way to getting to a ton of crop. At a 1,500 pounds, I'll show you some numbers in a second. There's a couple $100 of oil and meal value. At 2,000, including the quality improvements that we're making, it's about 300. So we're already there in our first cycle, and we anticipate quickly getting to that 1 ton an acre, which is a very exciting economic opportunity. When we look at the meals and the oil side, when we first had native pennycress, it was not a good feed product. It had a lot of fiber. With the genome edits that we've been able to do, we have been able to have our meal come in just like canola meal. Canola meal has been extremely successful in dairy, especially in the western part of the United States where they can cost effectively bring it in from Canada. We think we can also be growing in the Midwest here very effectively, fit that upper Midwest dairy market, and the same thing for swine. When we look at our oil, It's an oil that's similar to canola, but one of the things that's really interesting about it is that its natural composition is only 5% saturated fat. It's an extremely low saturated fat oil, which is going to make it interesting, especially combined with its low carbon intensity. From a business model perspective, we want to approach this a little differently. Because of the fact that we have made all these changes to the crop, we've really created CoverCress, and we can protect it with intellectual property. We envision making this a true partnership with a processor, where we will collect our revenue as a percentage of what the processor sells oil and meal for it. We're all in it together, and that puts us on the hook for increasing yield. It puts us on the hook for improving quality. We envision the farmer providing the land, fertilizer, and harvest. We'll provide the seed and seeding services, making it a very easy way for farmers to start. We don't envision farmers putting this on all of their land, going from corn to beans. We look at this at maybe a third of the land. Once we get that harvest into the middle of May, being a very realistic opportunity and a very exciting opportunity for this crop. As I mentioned, we're 5 years in. This is going to be our critical year in looking at those first year yields because it's our third year of seeing those on a wider variety. We're also going to see that second generation. And most importantly, we move from being a research company, as we have been for the last 5 years, into a commercial company this next year because we're going to be producing our foundation seed for the first crop that we intend to plant in the fall of 2021. We are seeking partnership. We're at the point where we would like a lot more involvement with farmers, so I'm thrilled to be here with all of you. If you're interested in looking at some plots this spring, they're covered in snow right now, we would love to do that, or if you're interested in growing some research plots next fall, love to do that. Also employees, as well as building out the value chain. So we can see that we think CoverCress has got a tremendous opportunity to fulfill on the promise of helping be a fabulous environmental steward, but doing it at the same time that it earns its own way and makes money for the farmer. And when we think about it on a global perspective, really be producing food and energy feedstock with a very low carbon footprint. Thank you.
That's good. One question from our audience group.
Jerry, thank you very much for the presentation. Just one quick question. You mentioned about the oil is very similar to canola, and the oil you were talking about using it into jet fuel. Are you thinking on getting the food grade for the oil?
Yes, the purpose of making the change in the oil has been that it makes it a dual-use oil. So we've eliminated all of the erucic acid, which is in naturally in this plant and was in other brassicas, such as rapeseed, before it became canola. So our intent is for it to be a food-grade oil and a very unique food-grade oil, but at the same time also be flexible to be a low-carbon feedstock for biodiesel and renewable jet fuel. Thank you.
Jerry, quickly, do you want to say something about international markets? Where else can this be used?
Yes, thank you. So I talked a lot about the Midwest. We are based in St. Louis. We're a relatively small team, and we're sitting right next to probably the single biggest opportunity here in the Midwest in that corn-soybean rotation. But that same ecological mix of corn and soybeans has a fit in Argentina, it has a fit in Ukraine, Romania, and it has a fit in China. So there's a number of places where the same ecological condition exists as the one here. We're just focused on this one because we're developing the crop and we live next door to it.
In terms of commercial adoption, are you seeing any back pressure over here, Jerry? Are you seeing any, in terms of commercial adoption, in talking to farmers, what are you hearing in terms of resistance to this type of concept?
Yeah, from a commercial adoption perspective, naturally we're several years away from that happening yet. But the questions that farmers ask, the single most important thing that comes up is getting out of the field in time to get that soybean crop in. And today our maturity, we are getting out around May 25th. We want to move that up to May 15th. And we've got a line, this is really interesting, one of the lines that we found, because one of the first things that the team did was collect a very wide selection of native plants from all across North America. Happened to be that one of them that was found at 10,000 feet of altitude in Winter Park, Colorado, when we bring it to the Midwest, is mature 10 days earlier, and that's going to be a really important parent in the future. But getting to May 15th is the single most important thing for farmers. What they have seen is that and this is probably true of most cover crops or all cover crops, the soil tilth that you get is fantastic, so planting soybeans into it has been really good. So, of course, the money and the maturity are the two things they're really focused on.
Okay. Thanks, Jerry.
Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Jerry. So next up, we're going to pull up S4, and Carlos Hirsch is going to present.
Okay, so my name is Carlos Hirsch. I'm here with S4. S4 is a company that originated in Argentina, and I run the office in St. Louis, actually a neighbor of Jerry here. Before I start talking about the company and the technology, and we're going to be talking about data and algorithms, I want a little participation of the audience. So pay attention and please participate. Quick data collection exercise I'm going to have with you. If you have a wristwatch, not a smartwatch, a wristwatch, please raise your hands. Okay, so that's quick data collection. Here's about maybe 25% of the audience, maybe 30. How do you feel about that kind of information? Not very useful, right? What if I can turn that and use a little bit of correlation and statistic and say, well, if I can correlate that with something more useful and try to understand, well, if you are wearing a wristwatch or you still own one, you probably grew up in a generation that was analog, not digital. And those of you that didn't raise your hand, probably more in the digital era. So that's kind of what we do with S4. We collect data and transform that data into something a little more useful. What we do is we collect satellite data and read biomass across entire countries. We cover US, Brazil, Argentina, and we look at the level of county level data and see how crops are growing and transform that into an index that can be then used to transfer risk in a financial market. This formula doesn't need to be explained, and that's the algorithm part of my presentation. And hopefully, if you're here, you understand that when supply is up and demand is down, prices are going to probably go down. And on the other hand, if supplies are low, demand is high, prices probably go up, right? The important thing here you can see is that on the supply side, it's the farmland, and on the demand side, it's a news article. And that starts telling you the difference between who really got to worry about producing supply. So I believe if you're here in this conference, you're important about supply. And the three major things that really affect supply, as you know, is the environment, genetics, and your practices. About 50% is practices, is all your precision ag, how good you are at your farming, how much technology you're applying. Then you have the genetics, and then the part that a lot of people forget about, but the weather reminds us once in a while, are the systemic weather events. Just like this week, who could predict 3-4 months ago that this week we're gonna have a blizzard, right? So that affects, and that's what we focus on, is on those big systemic events, not your local farm situation, but the big systemic events that will affect lots of farms within an area. Unfortunately, my slides are not working as supposed to, but what I was trying to show with this is on that same formula, you have 3 levers that you all try to play with. But the reality is the levers that you can really play are the supply and the price. The demand, if you could really play the demand, you shouldn't be here. You should be in Argentina this week talking to Xi and Trump. But on the supply side, unfortunately, every single farmer ends up being a competitor of each other, and that level is not that big. So what if, like you do in pricing, you can hedge the price and kind of put a top and a bottom where you want to land when you have your supply to sell. What if you can do that on the supply side and hedge if you are in a downturn weather-wise? And that's what we do. We provide, with technology, we bring an opportunity with an index, so a unique metric across the globe to measure downturns in biomass that correlate very well with yield. And with that index, you can trade that risk with the financial market. Today, we have one partner, which is Munich Re, is the largest reinsurance company in the world, out of Munich, Germany. They are a 60 billion company in revenue, and size-wise, they definitely are the largest reinsurance. To give you an idea, if you don't know reinsurance businesses, ask your insurance agent. Their insurance companies insure their risk with the reinsurance company. So how our product works. Basically, if you have risk, and you don't need to be just a farmer, you could be a co-op, anybody in the supply chain, co-ops, suppliers, transportation companies, even banks can hedge their risk of not having supply during this next season. So let's say a big drought comes through your region and your elevator doesn't have that much grain to run through, you're gonna have an impact on your working capital or your income. So you gotta figure out what that number is. Second step, you gotta tell us which county you wanna hedge that risk. And third, which crop? Are you hedging corn risk or soybean risk? And the cost will be anywhere between 2 to 5% of that value. So if you're covering $100,000 at risk, we're gonna, not we, but the contract will be billed, you'll be charging about $3,000, so 3% of that cost. Next, all that has to happen before planting, to be fair with both parties. So for us in the US will be end of April, where you're gonna have to get into this agreement. And basically what it is a over-the-counter derivative that you sign with Munich Re based on our index. And again, that happens at planting time. We read the indices during summertime. That's where the highest correlation is with a loss of yield due to drought. We will publish that index around October, first week in October. And about 10 days after that, 10 business days, if there is a drought, Munich Re will be paying you. So we've been using this for 3 years in Argentina. And as you don't know, Argentina is a country that doesn't have subsidized crop insurance. And they had a major drought last year. So last year, Munich Re paid $7.5 million in payouts to farmers down there, helping a lot of them to keep up their business. Who can buy this? Because it's a derivative, you got to be an accredited investor. So a lot of the companies in the supply chain already are, and most farmers are as well, or you can probably meet those thresholds. And as I mentioned, who's covering the risk is Munich Re. So with that, I'll move to questions.
Your algorithms, are they based mostly on historic data or a combination of historic and what I'll call real-time data?
Yeah, so it's twofold. First, we have 18 years of history of data in every one of those counties that we cover. And that's what the first set of data that builds what is the trigger. So what's going to be the number that's going to be below that historical level that if next season the next reading comes below that trigger will trigger a payment. And then on the current year, yeah, we use current data. So as satellites provide that data to us, we'll work that data and run our machine learning on it.
So in the U.S., who are you finding are your best early adopter customers of the offering?
So we shift our focus a little bit out from farmers more into the supply chain. We believe that because the supply chain can't have access to crop insurance, subsidized crop insurance, they should look at this with different eyes. It's an opportunity for them to cover maybe their working capital or some other risk, or maybe the loan, their operating loan. Even banks can cover their interest on their loans that they have out there in case there is an issue at a specific county or counties. So we shifted a little bit that way, but that doesn't mean farmers can't access this opportunity. We have coverage all the way from the Dakotas the I-States, and northern Missouri, and we're adding for next year, we're adding Kansas, Nebraska, Minnesota, and Wisconsin. Thank you.
Thanks, Carlos. Thanks so much, Carlos. Up next, we've got Larry Clark presenting NanoGuard.
Thank you, Connie. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Larry Clark, and you just saw my whole presentation. All right. Quickly about me. So I spent the first 30 years of my career with a company called Bunge in the trading world, and then running their agribusinesses in North America. I'm now in the world of a startup, so quite different. But as you notice, Bunge is one of our major investors. So I asked the question, you know, making money in the world of business is hard. Making money in agriculture can be harder. And making it harder yet again is if you are wasteful. And what NanoGuard is focused on is reducing global food waste, global feed waste, and improving food safety. So reducing waste and improving food safety on a global scale. All right. There we go again. Y'all hang with me. There we go. Okay, so studies show 1 billion tons a year of food and feed is lost. That's every year, 1 billion tons. And that's due to microbial activity as well as mycotoxins on the surface of these food and feeds. What we're focused on is reducing this microbial load, the microbes such as fungus, mold, bacteria, such as E. coli, salmonella, and then the mycotoxins such as aflatoxins, rallinone, DON. All right. So let me back up. So we're basically focused on reducing microbial activity and mycotoxins on food and feed. Now, I know everybody here that's in the grain business has had to deal with microbials, and especially the mycotoxin. Our technology is based around a high voltage cold plasma, and basically what we're doing is, it's simplified, is we're moving air between two high voltage plates, creating an energized air. That energized air is then blown across your corn, your wheat, soybeans if necessary. We've been effective at reducing microbial activities by greater than 99%, some all the way down to 0. And we've also been able to reduce the mycotoxins on grain as upwards as much as 80%. And we know that in every year, there's an outbreak of mycotoxins. The thought, if we can reduce those down by the 50 or 80%, the value of that grain is going to go up appreciably. All right, I'm going to try it. Oh, well. All right. So the areas in which we're focused, we started out specifically in grain because we had Bunge as an investor, as a partner. They see the value in the corn market, reducing mycotoxins. But we've then spread out into fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, meat, seed, ground nuts such as peanuts and tree nuts. We've had one of the largest peanut butter manufacturers interested in our technology because of the aflatoxin that shows up on peanuts. So then I broke out what is the value of just looking at corn for the United States, and the total addressable market, or the TAM, shows as high as $650 million a year. That's the U.S. corn across the value chain. So that's working with the farm, working at the large aggregators, the processors, the ethanol plants, and partially in the feed industry. So it's a large amount of money that's there for the taking. We're also looking at the humanitarian perspective of food safety. So every day we pick up a paper and we see E. coli, we see salmonella, and some type of food or feed sources. So as we move forward, let me see if I can get these photos here. The areas that we've focused on since we moved out of the grain world. So we feel like we've developed the technology around the grain, and just because somebody's probably going to ask, what's it cost? From a variable cost perspective, we think the treatment is somewhere around $0.015 per bushel. So it's not onerous to treat this grain. What you see here is beef. So we've treated beef to reduce the microbial load. On the left side is what's treated. It's still a nice rosy color. On the right side, let's just say it's not as rosy, and if you were there in person and could smell it, you would know that there was even a greater difference here. On tomatoes, so shelf life extension. We've extended shelf life on fresh fruits and vegetables and meat upwards between 4 days and up to 21 days. You see the inset is without any mold, any fungus. That's our treatment. On the large photo, as you see where the fungus is growing quite rapidly. And then this particular picture gets everybody's attention, because we've all bought that flat of raspberries or strawberries and come home, put it in the fridge, and open it up the next day, and it's moldy, right? So on the right side, this is strawberries that has been set out on the counter for 7 days, still edible. On the left side is basically just a pile of goo. So the ability to knock these microbial activities off has definitely extended the shelf life of these things. There are some market competitions out there. We know that heat pasteurization, such as milk, it's a great technology, but it changes the flavor, it changes the texture of different foods. There's also irradiation, and it is a wonderful technology, but nobody will use it. And then you have chemical treatments, and the whole category of food is moving away from chemical treatments because nobody wants chemical residues left on their food. And our particular treatment, the one thing about the gas that we're producing, it has a very short half-life, and so we treat the corn, we treat the fruit, we treat the vegetables, and within seconds, minutes, and maybe an hour at the most, it reverts back to its native state, which is air. And then lastly, there are some edible coatings out there in the industry. They're not really a competitor of ours. We actually think they're symbiotic with us. We're able to reduce microbes, reduce the mycotoxins, and these coatings actually will hold them in place and prevent them from being recontaminated. All right, so where are we as NanoGuard in our current stage? So we are in version 8 of a prototype in the lab. We're currently in the lab. We have a pilot under construction, and the pilot also will serve as a mid-size commercial device, so we should have a commercial device ready by late next year. Patents. We have notice of intent to grant, which means we're going to get a patent granted probably within the next 2 or 3 months, both US, but also the EU. And then we've completed an initial license agreement. We have a Series A term sheet signed, and what that means for me is there should be money coming in pretty soon, and that's what we're doing now is gathering our syndicate partners for this term sheet. So with that, I'll take questions.
What's your first key market, and what's the sense of the savings as a result in that market?
So we're focused right now on the first market. Actually, the focus. There are 2 areas we're focused on. One is the large grain industry, right? So large aggregation points, processing plants, or large grain elevators. And there again, if the variable cost is $0.015 a bushel, it depends on how severe the aflatoxin or mycotoxin outbreak is that year. But we've seen years, we know that we've taken what used to be $5 corn, and we've haircut it by $2.50 because of these. So the upside is significant. The second one is looking to move faster in the smaller markets. There again, the market signals we're getting right now is the peanut industry is really interested to reduce the mycotoxins or aflatoxins specifically.
Those of us who are wearing wristwatches remember the fiasco of irradiated foods.
Yes.
How do you have much of a problem distinguishing your technology versus radiation?
So that's a real good question. I would tell you that we think we're actually going to get an organic labeling on this. We've researched it. There are some technologies out there that are close to that are certified organic, and that's the way we're going to go. So we're hopefully that will prevent a crossover with that word of irradiation.
Larry, here.
Andres.
Is this a process that can be applied into a constant, quick speed flow?
Yes. So if you visualize, you need our device and you need a fluid bed. And every large elevator, so we're going to produce the reactive gas or the energized air, and then we're going to blow it across a fluid bed. And every large elevator, farmer, processing plant has a fluid bed in their site. It's called a grain dryer. So we're going to turn off the heat, bring the corn down as an example, and we're going to blow our gas up through it. It's about a 30-minute process. We can actually do it in 10, but the size of the most commercial grain dryers allow for about a 30-minute treatment. Good. Okay, thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Larry. Next up, we've got Melissa with Herd Dog.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Melissa Brandow, CEO and founder of Herd Dog. We're the Internet of Herds. And please, for a show of hands, how many of you are dairy or beef producers in the audience? I'd love to know. Good, good, good. Well, thank you. I'm very pleased to be here today. I hail from Oregon. And just a little bit more about my background. I started my career at Apple Computer, and it has sort of indoctrinated everything I do. I'm a technologist at heart. But a decade and a half ago, my family moved to rural Oregon, which we really wanted to change our quality of life. And so we're kind of sandwiched between Seattle and Silicon Valley, and there's a lot going on there. About 3 years ago, I was with some producers talking about ag tech, and they indicated to me that their biggest frustration was that they couldn't get the data off of their tags when their animals were out in the field. So this livestock issue was a point of pain for them. They couldn't identify the animals unless they were at close range, and they had to either restrain them or confine them to be able to get the information off of them. And that was really the start of Herd Dog. And Herd Dog is a smart tag which connects to the cloud and pushes that data into an individual animal health record for livestock. So what we really try to address is these three fundamental questions that producers are asking. Is my animal healthy, or is she ill or injured? Is she in heat, or is she where she needs to be, or is she missing? So just as an example of the data that we generate, we're generating the data from the ear tag in real time, collecting it, pushing it to the cloud. We're able to identify heat about 20% more accurately and more quickly than you would if you were standing out in a field sort of trying to ID the animals. That makes the whole system more efficient. The animal becomes more productive. She's breeding much quicker. It's just a more overall precision application. And that is actually feeding into the supply chain. So the producers are our primary target, but what we see is the data that we're generating from helping the producers is very relevant to sustainability, traceability, all of the tracking within the supply chain that is really the future of precision agriculture. So the system itself is a smart tag, like I have here. It attaches to the animal's ear. And then we have a dog bone, which is a deployed data gatherer that you can put out in the field. So back to this original producer we spoke to, the idea of being able to gather data from the field, not having to be tied down to a barn, to create a whole wireless network that enabled producers, wherever they were and whatever kind of animals they had, to be able to gather data from the field. And that's really what we built. So the dog bone gathers the data from the field, and then either through your smartphone or the dog bone itself, you can push the data to the cloud. And one other little cool thing I wanted to show you we do. So you can also identify your animal if you're out in the field and trying to pick out Bessie from Daisy. The tags actually can be turned on from your mobile application. We use Bluetooth, so it's in every cell phone. And that really helps to drive our innovation as well. So you'll see that we're really moving quickly in that innovative area. So our primary focus is U.S. dairy. We worked pretty closely here in Kansas City with Dairy Farmers of America to orient our product around being able to provide services to that market. Primarily the middle range, the medium-sized producer who's usually running his own operation and looking to overall improve that operation. As I said, I'm from, my background being from Apple, the product is very consumer oriented, and so our secondary market is to the beef rancher. Beef rancher that works, full-time job, has some cattle in the backfield, and in this time of year rarely sees them during the day. So being able to provide that service to smaller producers is really our focus. And then researchers love us because we provide access to raw data feeds. We're tracking ear temperature, ambient temperature, weather, weather-related information like light and activity levels. Large market, I'm sure you all know there's quite a bit of livestock on the planet, about 3 billion plus large livestock, and they're growing at a rate faster than the human population. By all estimates, about $1 trillion a year market. We have our patents filed and issued. We've got more pending, but we have, in fact, really centered our innovation on the ear. What we've found by gathering this data is other discoveries and other biometric changes in the animals, such as milk fever, as I have up here, and also temperature-based pregnancy. So what we see is that their ear temperature typically spikes if they've been bred successfully. So rather than waiting 30 plus days to know whether that animal is pregnant or not, you might know sooner. So we've been very focused on orienting our technology around answering these types of questions. Our product today is the dog bone plus the dog tag, we call it. And it's available for about $1,000. You can buy a 25 tag plus a dog bone system. But we are looking at other applications as well. I hope nobody takes offense to the idea that we want to kill off RFID, but to our sense, it's probably a good way to go if you can find a technology that works, and we believe very firmly that ours does. We've also done SkyDog, which will launch next year, but it's essentially using a drone to collect data remotely, so you're able to get access to your animal's health and location pretty quickly just from your back porch. As I mentioned, we do have some great partners like DFA. We've been working with MLA, which is the Meat and Livestock Association of Australia, on a very large feedlot pilot next year. Australia tends to have a higher rate, higher density per ownership in beef. So for us, that was a normal next market. And we've just been really lucky. I think the technology and the direction we're going appeals to a lot of different companies. I've got a great team. Like me, a lot of people from the industry have chosen to change and improve their quality of life by moving to rural Oregon. So we've been able to recruit some great people from Intel and FLIR Services, which does optical recognition. So it's been fantastic that way. So I'll leave you with the idea that if you have a herd, you want to bring that herd closer. Using Herd Dog is the way to do it. Thank you.
Your current model has a 30-foot.
Yes, so Bluetooth today is about a 30-foot range, and that's all Bluetooth. Bluetooth 5, which is coming out.
A lot of operations, you'd have to have a lot of dog bones out there in the field. So I suspect these next generations are really the key.
Right. So the dog bone today is used as an opportunistic gatherer. So when the animals are close, you're putting the dog bone out. What's nice about that actually is the dog bone also operates as a behavior-based metadata collector. So you're able to see who's visiting the watering trough and who's with them when they visit the watering trough. And you start to see patterns of behavior where, animals hang out together and they create very regular patterns of visits to certain locations throughout the day. So we're really excited about the behavior-based metadata that we're starting to see with dog bones. That said, Bluetooth 5, which is actually in our dog bone, will be coming out with Bluetooth 5 dog tags next year, have a range that we've tested today of about 200 meters. So very quickly, that innovation is going to push forward in a longer range. Thanks for your question. Carter? No? Anybody? All right, well.
You said the cost was $1,000 per kit. Is that right?
It's $1,000 for the initial starter kit. So the 25 tags plus a dog bone for $1,000, and then dog bones separately are about $500 each. That includes 6 months of service. So after that, we're looking at a monthly service charge to monitor and manage the animals. We'll continue to add more insights into that service as you work with us.
See, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Next up, we've got Jesse presenting Mercaris.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jessie Beauvais, and I'm the Director of Business Development at Mercaris. So Mercaris is kind of a weird name. People always ask us, what is it? Mercaris is actually 2 Latin words we've smushed together. Mercaritas, which means a gathering of people or a gathering for commerce, and then Mercari, which means to trade, which are the 2 things that we do here at Mercaris. We gather information and we trade. So Mercaris was started in 2012, and we do 2 main things. We create data, and we have a trading platform for organic, non-GMO, and other identity-preserved crops. So we create the kind of data that you usually get from CME or USDA or all the normal places you go for pricing data, as well as create an auctions platform where you normally see on the CME. So how customers use Mercaris. Mercaris is useful to everybody who would use those same tools I just mentioned earlier. So we've got input providers, growers, mills, merchandisers, brokers, elevators, everybody up and down the supply chain. You use Mercaris to gain better insight about the markets, and you use Mercaris to conduct analysis, to gain an edge, to do anything that you normally do with pricing data. And this just shows you some of our customers range up and down the supply chain. So we've got everybody from Midwestern BioEgg to Whole Foods. So all of you are thinking, yeah, this organic market, everybody's talking about it, but what is it really? So the organic food market is actually pretty big. $45.2 billion were spent on the organic food market last year. That's a 6% increase year over year. Food only increased 1% year over year. 5.5% of food sold in the United States is organic. So Mercaris focuses on row crops. We focus on corn, soybeans, wheat, oats, rye, and barley, organic, and then non-GMO corn and non-GMO soybeans. And we, this past year, also got into the organic dairy market. So, the first side of what we do is our data service. We create fully customizable reports that focus on first pricing, the one thing that you normally can't get from anywhere else about organic and non-GMO markets. So we create volume-weighted average prices for both spot and forward contracts, for both food and feed contracts. We focus on the US and Canada, and we even drill down into some regional areas as well. We also create supply and demand analysis. We look at import and trade reports. We are the only ones this year that created an organic and non-GMO acreage report. Usually that's something you look to the USDA for, and they didn't have the funding for that this year. We also have an interactive asset map that details over 500 different certified organic first handlers across the US and Canada. We have about 75 to 80% of non-GMO coverage just because it's easy to switch into and out of. And then again, new for 2018 is our organic dairy market. So where does this data come from? Mercaris conducts what we call the Mercaris Market Survey, where over 60 first handlers across the US and Canada participate weekly in our service. So we get about 15 new data points a week, And the reported bushels that come in represent about 25% of the organic bushels grown in the US and Canada. So it's statistically significant. And again, the commodities that we report on are organic corn, organic barley, organic soybeans, soybean meal, oats, wheat, organic rye, non-GMO corn, and non-GMO soybeans. So how is this different from the other pricing you're seeing? On the very bottom is the CME spot price. The next row up is the USDA feed price. So the USDA feed organic corn price is a bi-weekly farmer fob gate price. And it's usually a range. So this is the USDA calling a farmer and asking them, what have you seen lately for your organic corn prices? And then above that is the Mercaris price. So again, Mercaris's market survey is these first handlers calling in, telling us, or going onto our website and telling us exactly how much they paid for their organic corn that week. So we're seeing actual delivered pricing, not just what people are talking about. The other side of our business is the Mercaris auctions platform. We call it the new handshake. The great part about the Mercaris auctions platform is that you have a secure centralized transaction platform with real-time price discovery. So we make sure that all the players that are on our platform are creditworthy, have an organic certificate, have a non-GMO certificate, whatever they're going to buy or sell, and have good contract performance. So through our auctions platform, we're able to both host auctions or have continuous cash markets, whatever you're looking for. So our auctions platform has really been going for the past 3 years, so since 2015. And in that time period, we've traded over $7 million nominal value of commodities. So it's pretty impressive. I mean, definitely not huge yet, but we're getting there and we're having year-over-year huge growth. And as a buyer or seller, you're able to buy or sell spot or forward contracts. You're able to have a live order or a sealed bid auction. And because our technology is agnostic, we can take over a dozen different IP commodities, including what we just added last year, milk. So why would you use Mercaris if you're a buyer or seller? Well, if you're a seller, you get fast, secure payment, and you can find some new buyers in your area. If you're a seller, it's a great procurement tool when you just can't find those last bushels to fill whatever contract you're working on, or if you're looking for new sellers or new farmers. So with that, do you have any questions?
So your revenue model, do you who are your customers on the platform itself, not on the auction platform?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we literally have customers that start at the input side and go all the way up to financial analysis, academics, everybody in the entire supply chain. And our revenue model starts at free, which is crazy, I know, but farmers don't like to pay money. So with our farmer free plan, farmers give us a little bit of information, and with that, they get to see what the cash market's doing, and they also get access to that auctions platform, and they get an Organics 101. So if you're a farmer and you're thinking about getting involved in the organic market, this is the first step that you can take for free. You can learn what cash markets are doing and see if it's really worth it for you to jump in and get your organic certificate.
And if you had in your auction platform, you said you've done $7 million worth of transactions?
Yes, sir.
What's your margin on that?
So, great question. On organic commodities, when they trade, we charge 10 cents per bushel on each side. And on non-GMO commodities, we charge 5 cents a bushel on each side.
But this isn't an active exchange like the CME that you were drawing the parallel example to.
No, not yet. And that's partially because the market is still so small. Only 1% of what's grown in the United States is considered organic. So the markets are pretty thin, but they're growing every year. And with the increased volume and increased growth, we hope to get to more of an active market.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So network effect here of getting people into the platform seems pretty critical. How are you going to accelerate that?
Yeah, so we come to places like this. We try to talk to farmers. We go to all the big organic conferences and talk to people. The biggest thing is just gaining awareness of what Mercaris is and what we're doing. And the other side is working with different partners. There's a lot of Mercaris partners in the room today. So it's just working to find those bushels and help people make the auctions happen. All right, thank you guys.
Okay, thanks, Jesse. Next up, we've got Lucas here from AmberAg.
Good evening. My name is Lucas Free. I'm the co-founder of Amber Agriculture, where, simply put up front, we want to help farmers capture high market prices by using analytics and automation. And it's really all powered around our core tech, which are these tiny kernel block sensors that capture all of the key quality metrics of grain. And we want to basically help farmers optimize around moisture, take advantage of new opportunities in tracking, and try to unlock some value right now that we think is captured that folks can grab back, while also looking to tighten up the supply chain a bit. Really quick to step back, I'm a sixth-generation farmer from central Illinois. Largely, we're yeoman sharecroppers that grows corn and soybeans, a little bit of popcorn. I started Amber out of the University of Illinois, was an ag economics MBA major, and had kind of dabbled across the ag value chain, doing finance with Farm Credit, saw seed production with Monsanto, did some consulting. And one summer with one of our consulting projects, we were working with one of the big trade associations, and largely I spent the whole summer just talking to everybody for an hour. Grain industry guys, folks in academia, people around the globe about the competitiveness of the American product, our grain commodities, and what changes needed to occur. There are really three big talking points. Everybody said the same thing. End value pricing. We got to convince farmers that we're growing nutrients, not bushels. Quality is key to the competitiveness of the American product, as well as composition when we're competing against Brazil. And really kind of those themes emerged and kind of led into my interest in this space, that it's kind of this grain fascination that the entire ag value chain is based on moisture and information. And the first one's not really being monitored or optimized for in much of any sense of the word. And the second, information is not really being shared across parties. So I met my co-founder at the University of Illinois, and he's a complete opposite background. He's an East Coast New Yorker, had been working in bioresearch labs since high school on sensor implants for the body. He worked for Fitbit R&D as an 18-year-old this summer. They IPO'd. And he was just recently named a Thiel Fellow, which Peter Thiel's a pretty famous investor. He picks 20 kids a year who have dropped out of school to focus on big world challenges. So we met at the U of I and formed Amber 3 years back. I'm going to step back one more time again just to kind of do a prelude here and connect some of the stuff we've talked about. But I'm going to make this kind of assertion with a little bit of pomp that I think that we're kind of right on the cusp of what I would call the golden age of grain. And it might sound a little foolish to say that we got trade wars and painful prices, not necessarily saying that prices are forecasting that that's going to go up, but I think there's a big new opportunity on differentiated markets for farmers to grab. And if we step back, and this is just kind of how I summarize it in my own mind on advancements in ag, say we started with trading grain, right? We traded with other countries. We moved grain from spot to spot. Then we mechanized. We built tractors. We became more efficient with that. In my lifetime, what we've been able to watch is, the advancements with seed, trying to crank out higher yields, and then steering the wheels with auto steer. So the tractors developed. We got auto steer. More recently, here we've got the data and the drone plays, managing all of our information in software. We're starting to capture that information in software. We've got drones doing imagery, and we see the seed companies have kind of grabbed this data play and started to advance on that. And what I say what we're about to step into is this era of, this is kind of grain's new opportunity, where we're circling back, that we kind of started by trading grain way back when and haven't really changed much or touched it since. And there's a lot of things happening in the market and a lot of new ideas developing that I think come 2019, 2020, things are going to move very quick, still slowly, but very quick. In the grain space specifically, we've got marketplace plays, Mercurus, big shout out, that's really cool. Companies like Farm Lead, Farmers Business Network, Indigo, all looking at how we can trade grain a little bit differently. And then the second tier to that are these gadgets, is what I'll call it. The connected world is becoming increasingly accessible by tech being more affordable. And we all know this, like we're pulling this straight out of the headlines. The market's reacting, everybody's reconsidering their business model around grain. But why this is also the moment too is because it's matching this big moment in tech where all of a sudden sensors are dirt cheap, cloud computing costs are near nothing, and cell coverage is being spread around. If we tie back to the scooters this morning, I'm sure that idea was had a long time ago. The only reason why there's scooters lying around everywhere and they work today is because these little cell modems we can slap on almost anything and capture that information and know where these assets are moving. So we're at this prime time where the gadget connected world is going to intersect with this need and these changes happening with the grain market. So with Amber, we're really excited to look at how we can introduce some automation within the post-harvest process. And again, we're starting with this first step of, grain's kind of annoying to manage. If you're looking at automating the farm, start with the small things that can have kind of a big return impact. Folks love driving tractors. We don't have to automate that. But this driving around to sites, climbing bins, looking at different quality metrics, it's an easy, quick thing that we can automate now that the tech is becoming increasingly affordable. And we started this 2 years ago. I've never met a farmer that's really had that big of issues with spoilage or quality, but it's becoming more and more interesting to folks as their bins get spread across this countryside and they build larger structures. And then as we get down the value chain, as we mix grain, as we send it down the line, that's where folks have more and more issues and the quality challenges emerge. So if we had to look at what might be the ideal way to get high prices, we'd know what we'd have. We could monitor these assets as they sit, temperature, moisture, look for the bad stuff, run fans at the perfect time to get grain to 15% corn and hit the benchmark. We might know the attributes as they sit there to capture higher prices. And third, in the food grade premium grain markets, can we keep that grain separate, keep the agronomic info intact with the grain now that we're storing that data in software? There's going to be big market opportunities, I think, with farmers that have their data organized, are growing a premium product. The food supply chain is increasingly interested in that. So our core tech and what we just started with is, what if we could basically build something that can stick with the grain, take a beating, report all these quality metrics out. And we're starting just with the basic stuff of temp, humidity, moisture, and mold. But this is kind of the first wireless sensor that can go with the grain from spot to spot and kind of carry the story with it. If you've seen the movie Twister, a lot of people say, oh, you're building these little Dorothy modules that they throw up into the storm to track that. Very kind of similar concept for what we're tossing in grain. So you literally just toss these in as you fill up a grain bin. About 1 per 1,000 bushels is what we're playing around with today. And then we just grab the data, shoot it into the charts, try to break it into a couple tiers. It's all connected to 2 other pieces. That's a plug-and-play system. So we've got the gateway that sits at the roof, grabs all the data, quick install, not much setup there. We wire in a simple box to the aeration controls. And if we're to automate this first process, what we do is we look at the internal grain condition, the external weather environment. We apply all the grain science research that's out there. We can figure out these little windows to aerate at the peak moment to make whatever move you're trying to make up or down. But ideally, we don't want to look at any data. We just want to go straight to the recommendation. This is the hour you should run based on your goal, and here's the button to click and agree with. So just kind of the first data display, if you want to dig into it, it's accessible. It's not a new space. Bin monitoring's been around for a long time. You guys have looked at this cable-based technology. Folks step away and have some skepticism around the price point. You know, a couple $8,000-$10,000 a bin has kept folks away. We're introducing it within a subscription sensor model. So these are like one-time disposable use. You'd get new ones every year. And I'd kind of highlight that's the coolest aspect about it, is that over time, as you get new sensors, your tech's going to get better every year. We're going to add new things, cooler elements that what you're subscribed to, ideally trying to get to those areas like sensing non-invasively around protein and oil and starch content and the like. So again, just kind of quick, the on-farm benefits. The biggest one is that, yeah, this moisture metrics, you can calculate it. So we'll know what the grain is at the beginning of the year, we'll know what it is at the end, and we'll know what move we made and you know, the value that we added. Moisture is the same for grain piles, grain barges, and it's a global issue, international storage and the like. So our kind of core tech is just this plug-and-play system today. We started out of the University of Illinois 2 years ago. We're now a team of 5 based in Chicago. Myself and my co-founder started, once we had researched the market enough, we jumped over to Shenzhen, China, and lived there above the electronics markets, prototyping, pick and placing, trying to source all these really niche new technologies to get something into this size of a kind of kernel-like concept. And then we've kind of built out our team on a very strong tech pedigree, pulling folks from Tesla, from Fitbit, Lockheed and Martin, for how we're building out the team. We've had a few fun highlights along the way. Our sensor was talked about in a hearing of the U.S. Senate in the Farm Bill conversations around an issue with global grain trade fraud. 2 winters back, we were named Best Startup at CES, which is kind of the largest tech show in the world. We're an ag product at a consumer show, but kind of stood out, and Engadget gave us that denotation there. So this is pretty exciting. Was really happy to have the opportunity to present here. I want to thank the Van Trumps. This is kind of our first showing of our technology to the public. To date, we've done very controlled trials with a select amount of farmers, and we'll be looking to expand on that for how we do a controlled rollout for next harvest. So I'd encourage everybody to check us out. There's still not much online, but if you go to www.amber.ag, there's a Learn More tab. Drop us a note, say you saw us at the Van Trump conference, and we'll look forward to connecting with those that are interested in trying this type of technology next year. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Do you need to be able to retrieve your sensors?
So we work in some of the premium grain supply chains. Ideally is where we want to be first, where we want these sensors to flow through, and we work with those facilities because we can recapture them on the gravity tables, the scalping equipment. We do have a concept that we can grab it out on farm, but I mean we're really trying to think big with this, that we would envision one day. It's definitely like pushing the envelope as far as these types of sensors existing in the supply chain, but that would be the idealistic kind of future that we see.
Do you also think about precision fumigation at some time, or?
We're not really going to niche into the fumigation. There's a couple monitoring offerings that are attacking that, that we're probably not going to start on that too early.
So does your system, does it tie into the electrical on the fans as far as controlling when the fans operate? So like if you wanted to rehydrate your grain, you put soybeans in at 9%, you know, we're selling weight, you know, it's only going to run the fans when it's humidity or moisture in the air. So
yep.
it basically pays back, you know, if you run some of those rate of returns. I have a
yes.
different system and it runs that now, but that's a lot less money. And I'm a farmer after all, and I want to save money. So does it do that as well?
So yeah, we've got the middle piece. It's a aeration box that we can wire into the fans. We do a lot of our grain science research with the top academic in the space that's written a lot of it. Most of those like aeration algorithms are pretty well known, that it's not too much of a secret sauce, if you will. How we're kind of thinking about it is we're always going to recommend, you know, a weekly window, and we kind of always want the farmer to make that decision and agree with it. Because you'd actually be really surprised, even in this field of like grain science, there's a lot of discrepancies in what folks believe, and kind of farmers have their own methodologies that they think for when to run the fans. So we'll kind of present it as an option they can agree with or set their own parameters.
So we could load those parameters in from our iPad and say we want the soybeans at 13%. The sensors are every 1,000 bushels, so they're all throughout the bin spread out. So they would detect the hot spot or any kind of heat, and then fans would kick on automatically to cool that grain.
Correct. Yeah. The biggest probably interest is around rehydration. Guys who storing seed beans, and they know there's $10,000 there if they can toggle it from 9% up to 11, 12%. We would never make like a guarantee that, at the start that we're going to get you there, but we would, be able to calculate the days and your, fan power and try to get you as close to possible on the amount of days that we can capture on a window where the aeration would be at its peak.
Thank you.
Yep.
How do you price your product?
So the way it's priced, it's all on a per bushel metric. It'd be about 2 or 3 cents per bushel per year. So we're trying to find you a couple nickels, potentially a couple dimes, and it'd all be framed within that 1-year payback period. So it would either pay for itself every year, and some guys just want the time saving and the luxury of having bins 20, 30 miles across that they can just click fans on and off. And then, the calculable ROI is, can we make moisture moves?
Thank you.
How much heat will it handle from grain dryers?
The sensors all spec'd out to take up above 220. That is still something that we need more research around on the impacts of these running through dryers. So we haven't stepped entirely into that. Ideally today, we toss them in after.
And finally, last but not least, we've got Yossi here to present Autonomous Pivot.
Hello, my name is Yossi Aran. I'm co-founder and CEO of Autonomous Pivot. Autonomous Pivot is an Israeli startup company developing patent-pending technologies to enable the robotic farming revolution. At the same time, we are also second-generation farmers, so we understand that this revolution is going to be price-sensitive revolution. So instead of trying to build very expensive robotics, farming robotics, our vision is to transform the existing infrastructure of center pivots into autonomic robots. And we are going to do that in 3 steps. In the first step, we equipped the pivot with remote, non-invasive sensors, enabling it to see the crop and the soil. At the second step, we're adding AI and deep learning technologies that enable the pivot to get autonomous decision about irrigation, fertigation, and even crop protection. At step 3, we're adding some social abilities to the pivot, so these robotic pivots will be able to talk to each other and to form what we call a social network of robots. The problem that we're addressing is enabling farmers to feed 9 billion people planet and do it by affordable robots. The audience that we're targeting the farmers, but also the dealers and management companies as a client. Since we are focusing on irrigated crop, the 5K, the 500K central pivot is good demonstration for the market size and the potential. So as described before, the solution is turning the central pivot into autonomous robot, and we are going to do that in a price of $2,000 per pivot. As I mentioned, the first step is turning the pivot into a radar. Then we add AI technologies, deep learning technology, and social technologies. The fourth step is maybe the most important one, is the adaptive learning. As at the end of the years, we have the yield maps from one hand, and we have the history from the other hand. We can go pixel by pixel in the field, looking for low yield, and then go back to the history and see if we can justify this low yield by stress. If we can do that, we are going to learn for the next season to irrigate more, to fertigate more. But in some places, we will get low yield with no explanation for that. And in these cases, we will output new seeding map that advising the farmer not to seed in this area. This is also give us a competitive edge on other competitors that will try to give the same service in a cheaper price, because the farmer not going to want to lose all the information that we got about his specific field. We believe that using the autonomous decisions that the pivot will take can add extra $30K per pivot per year. $16K of it is by avoiding water stress. $8K is by avoiding nitrogen leaching, and $6K is by saving water and energy. And another $2K, we believe that our pivot will have enough brain that the consulting services are not going to be needed anymore. What's unique about our solution? So in the software side, we have unique algorithms taking the dynamics of data and cross correlation. This is a unique way of analyzing it. In the sensors, we introducing for the first time the ability to get soil content, soil moisture in the soil with non-invasive sensors that is moving together with the pivot and take thousands of samples compared to 1 or 2 samples with a stationary soil sensor. And also we have what we call nitrogen torch, is a tool that takes advantage on the fact that the pivot is rotating during the night and using special light to get the level of nitrogen within the plant. And system-wise, we are the only ones that closing the loop. It's not just recommendation, it's not just analyzing. We basically get decision and then act on it immediately. The current status, last season was the first season that we installed a system in the US. It was about 50 system, beta system, and what we see here is a system that was on a project of K-State University in Kansas. This is the ground penetration radar that non-invasively detect the level of moisture in the soil. What we can see here is that on the left side, we can see the GPR reading. So we can see, and this is from a 45 inches depth. We can see that our system, and in this case, our system only monitor the field. They didn't let us to change the plan because they didn't have enough confidence yet. So we simply monitor the state and the field. And what we can see here is that our system recognized that in 45 inches depth, a stress was, it's more than 10 days of stress that developed during that time. And since we also have cameras on the pivot, we can see that the dryness that this 10 days of stress created. So it means that we had in real time information that could save these 10 days of stress. Okay, this is a small demonstration of the applications that the user will have. And from one hand, you will have this application that you can go to any slice in the field and see the crop. But from the other hand, we believe in text messaging information. So the user don't have to be within the application. Let's see what it can do in weather. So basically, this SMS that I just got is, this is the way of communication. So the farmer simply get, what we saw in the weather, that the pivot was irrigated while it rained. This is something that happens every day in the US, that people continue to irrigate while it's raining. And here we got an SMS, and simply by pushing the one and send it, we can stop the pivot. And this is how the nitrogen torch look on the field and look for nitrogen level. Okay. Questions?
So what is your sense of the payback on the system?
So we believe that the farmer can do extra 30K per pivot, and we collect SAS for basic service 2K per year, and premium service 3.6.
So what's the nature of your competition, and what kind of intellectual property do you have around these sensors?
So we are the only one that can do soil sensing through the crop, non-invasive. This is a unique feature that we have, and it's essential for the ability to do the autonomous pivot, because if you try to rely on soil sensor, the information is not reliable enough to do it autonomously. And we also have some unique IPs about using crop as biomarkers and on the dynamic data analytics of the system. So all of that is provisional patents. It's not granted yet. Okay.
Okay, well, that concludes our pitch competition. Thanks to all for pitching, and thanks to all for listening. As a reminder, if you can write down your favorite company as the winner of the competition and just leave that slip on the table at the end, that would be great. Thanks again. Great presentations.